West Virginia Oath Keeper here says, we win, the House is ours. Yes, it is. It's been yours for 2 years. You actually won it 2 years ago and you regained control of it in this election. But do you understand what that means? That means you guys are responsible for the finances of the country. You guys are the only ones that can spend and appropriate money, which means it's you guys that have delayed aid to the hurricane victims, which means it's you guys that haven't passed any meaningful spending bills to help the American people in the last 2 years, but rather spent all of your time spending our taxpayer dollars investigating your opponents. It's you guys that have to figure out how to pass a budget. It's you guys that have to figure out how to balance that budget. It's you guys that have to figure out how to not blow a hole in our debt in our deficit and add trillions of dollars to our debt. And the problem with that is that you guys don't know how to do that. You don't. Listen, before anybody starts typing in the comment section, Democrats aren't that much fucking better at it either. But the last Democratic president, in the last 50 years to have a balanced budget was a Democratic president, Bill Clinton. He worked with the Republican Congress and they balanced the budget for the last 6 years of his 8 years in office. Handed off a surplus, not a deficit, not an annual deficit, a surplus to George W. Bush. Republicans don't know how to do this. They're not very good at it. Every time they're in office, they blow a massive hole in our deficit and increase the debt tremendously. And I'm not saying Democrats don't, but Democrats do cut government spending a lot. Obama cut government spending by 2/3 in his 8 years. Joe Biden has lowered the deficit, not the debt. And here's the key thing. For people that ask this, and inevitably somebody asks us, what's the difference between the deficit and the debt? Okay? The debt is what we owe as a country in total. It's an accumulative total over all the years that we've ever been a country, all the debt that we've ever incurred. That's what we owe. The deficit is what we spend every year compared to what we bring in. So just to use round numbers, because these are not the numbers. If you bring in $2 trillion in tax revenue, but you spend $3 trillion that year, then you have a $1 trillion deficit. And that $1 trillion deficit gets put on top of the debt, which is forever accumulating over and over and over and over and over again. Now, some people have held the positions of, who do we owe that money to? Fuck them, don't pay them. That's not quite how it works. That's the whole debt limit ceiling thing, right? So we pay the bills at the end of the year. So you go all year long and you swipe your credit card, and at the end of the year, and I know it's the end of the month, but at the end of the year the bill comes due. You have to go, all right, listen, our previous debt limit was, once again, and we're just going to use round numbers, our previous debt limit was $1 trillion. That's what we authorized ourselves to spend, but we spent $1.5 trillion. We need to raise the debt limit to $1.5 trillion to cover what we've already spent so that we make good on the bills that we have. In this round of negotiations, the reason why the first attempt at passing a continuing resolution failed is because Trump didn't want it to go through for multiple reasons. He said on Truth Social that he didn't want it to go through because he wanted a government shutdown during the Joe Biden administration. But one of the big sticking points for him was he wanted the debt limit to go away forever. He wanted Republicans to just do away with it. We don't have to set a budget for ourselves. We don't have to set a limit for ourselves. What we spends, we spends. And that's the Republican way. That's the Republican way. Whether you look at it as from a standpoint of pre-COVID spending or post-COVID spending, Donald Trump spent twice as much as Joe Biden did, because that's what Republicans do. They lower taxes on the upper earners and they spend like fucking crazy. And then they accuse Democrats of being tax and spend Democrats. But here you are. You have the House. You have the purse strings. You've had them for the last 2 years. You're going to have them for at least the next 2 years. That's a 4-year run where you guys control the purse strings. And let me ask you a question. What has the House done in the last 2 years under Republican control that benefits the American people? What are they planning to do in the next 2 years that's going to benefit the American people, financially speaking? Yeah, you won. But the problem with winning is now you have to actually govern. And you guys suck at actually governing.